Adjustment of the Township of Franklin. Call the roll, please. It's not here. I don't know.
Here, you can push this thing.
No, I don't have my. Anyway, welcome to today's regular meeting of the Township of Franklin Zoning Board of Adjustment. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided. Call the roll, please.
Anthony Caldwell.
Here.
Laura Grauman.
Here.
Bruce McCracken.
Here.
Alan Rich.
Here.
Robert Shepard.
Here.
Gary Rosenthal.
Here.
Joel Reese is standing behind me. Cheryl Bethia.
Here.
And Chairman Thomas.
That's a regular meeting.
Second.
As Joel was talking about, I didn't hear anything that was happening. I apologize. What happened? You want me to call for minutes?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, sorry. Laura Grauman.
Yes.
Bruce McCracken.
Yes.
Robert Shepard.
Yes.
Gary Rosenthal.
Yes.
Joel Reese.
Yes.
And Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Resolutions, Engel Berman Hotel at Somerset, ZBA 180006, site plan with signage. Need a motion.
I move. Second.
Laura Grauman. Bruce McCracken.
Yes.
Alan Rich.
Yes.
Robert Shepard.
Yes.
Gary Rosenthal.
Yes.
Cheryl Bethia.
Yes.
And Chairman Thomas.
Yes. 101 Metlers Road, ZBA 1900010.
Second.
Anthony Caldwell.
Yes.
Laura Grauman.
Yes.
Bruce McCracken.
Yes.
Alan Rich.
Yes.
Robert Shepard.
Yes.
And Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Matson Construction Incorporated, ZBA 180019.
Move it.
Second.
Laura Grauman.
Yes.
Robert Shepard.
Yes.
Gary Rosenthal.
Yes.
Joel Reese. And Chairman Thomas.
Yes. One that was on your desk tonight, Lemley, ZBA 190022.
Anthony, Laura, Bruce, Alan, Gary, or Chairman Thomas can second.
Second.
First. Anthony Caldwell.
Yes.
Laura Grauman.
Yes.
Bruce McCracken.
Yes.
Alan Rich.
Yes.
Gary Rosenthal.
Yes.
Joel Reese. Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Under the hearing sections, there's a number of changes. Muslim Foundation, ZBA 190016. This is an application for a D3 conditional use variance site plan, which the applicant seeks approval to convert the 1.5-story, 1,319 square foot dwelling into a child care facility, construction of a 1,530 square foot playground, handicap access to the building with ramp, construction of 425 square foot canopy, an additional sidewalk at 4749 Cedar Grove Lane, Somerset, block 468.09, lots 37 and 38 in the R40 zone. This is carried to October 17th with no further notification. Gina Ulrich, ZBA 190029, applicant seeks a C variance for construction of a 24-foot round above-ground pool and deck at 209 Wilson Road, block 417.01, lot 27 in the R40 zone. Also carried to October 17th, 2019. And Calvary Baptist Church, ZBA 190005, D3 conditional use variance, site plan with variances in which the applicant proposes to construct an addition, 1,444 square feet to the rear portion of the building and expand the on-site parking at 5 Franklin Street, Somerset, block 71, lots 1.01 and 2 in the R10H zone, carried to December 5th. No further notification. I'll just give you a notice, all right, and before we start. Nestor and Victor Marin, that application will be shifted last. In its place, it'll be Odin pharmaceutical. We'll get into details in that momentarily. The first application, Shatkan Patel, ZBA 19-00025, applicant requesting a C variance for construction of a one-story sunroom addition, 743 square feet in the rear of the residence, 40 Valleywood Drive, Somerset, block 508.02, lot 3.20, in the R40 zone. Who's here for that?
Please come forward. I'm going to need to swear you in. Could you take the microphone in your left hand, raise your right hand? You swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth? Holding it very close?
Yes.
Thank you. Have a seat, give us your name and address, and explain what you'd like to do.
My name is Vipul Patel. It's my wife here, Sakti Patel. We live at 40 Valleywood Drive, Somerset. And we are looking to do a patio on existing, sunroom on existing patio.
Okay. The variance is impervious coverage, correct? Yes. And all the setbacks, all the other, are no issue?
That's correct. They comply with the side and the rear setbacks.
And the only way then to reduce impervious coverage would be to make it smaller, correct?
Either, yeah, well, two ways. One would be to make the sunroom smaller or to reduce other impervious surface. You know, if the board wasn't inclined to approve it, you could make them remove portions of the driveway to comply. But those are something for the board to decide.
Okay, we're talking about 743 square feet. Does anybody have some other questions? I don't know how, honestly, you could make it smaller. I don't know if you have anything you can eliminate. For the record, is there any other impervious coverage on the property that you might take away and trade off? You need the sidewalks, you need the driveway? Yes. You don't have another patio? Anybody have questions here?
Do pavers count?
The pavers and the driveway,
And
patio,
the paver area is
and
the
the
walkway
house.
to the house. There are I'm looking at this. There are pavers, sunroom, where the sunroom is going to be, that's on top of the patio.
Okay,
Right.
so
And
I
then
have
to
not
the
sworn you
left.
in. If you would like to testify, please take the microphone in your left hand, raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Yes,
Thank you. Your name and address, please.
Andy Buckle, 445 Johnston Drive, Watchung, New Jersey.
And what's your relationship to the applicant?
I'm representing the builder. We were supposed to build a sunroom.
There are pavers, as I look at this survey, to the left of the proposed sunroom. What are they, and, I mean, could 10 pavers be removed, or, I mean, what would that reduce it sufficiently?
Well, I think the facts are that, two things. Number one, they aren't actually increasing impervious as a result of this sunroom. They actually were already over impervious.
Yeah, I
But the reason
understand
they were over impervious is because the driveway and the patios were put in without permits.
I
So,
understand that. So in order to make everything kosher, to get the full approval, what they did before,
yes,
and I understand
Yeah.
that. I'm looking at this other paver area, there's not a driveway, and there's not a walkway into the front of the house. And I'm just wondering if that could be cut a little bit to get you at least closer to compliance.
Yeah, I can't answer that. That's more of a question, I think, for the applicant of whether, I can't tell you whether that's more important to them versus the driveway. That's something the applicant would have to answer.
They're basically not increasing any coverage because that patio will be completely removed.
Wait, the mic has to be up against your mouth.
Okay. So that whole area of the sunroom will be built on that existing patio. That patio will be removed, and the foundation will be done on that. So
I know
there's
that,
not
but right
increasing
to
of
the
any coverage.
Next to it, here's the sunroom. Right next to it is our pavers that the sunroom is not being built on top of, like a patio that would be next to sunroom. Am I missing something?
Yes, you are right. I think there is a little patio there, and
Can that be reduced in any way, or, I don't know, put pervious, some kind of pervious coverage, or?
Yeah, right.
because actually, after the sunroom, we would like to, if it is possible, we would love to keep that little big patio there. If we take out, then there is no, like, once you get out of the,
I understand that,
Right.
but is it possible, I'm looking at a small piece of paper, so I
Right.
have a sense of it, but can some portion of that path,
There's
small
only
portion of that?
5%, I believe, of overage. So
Yeah,
few percent is
well, it's not a large
property
lot.
like that.
I'm sorry, there was mention in the application somewhere that the application cited an existing coverage of 32.1 and that it was going down. Was there a proposal to remove something? Why is the impervious less?
We're removing the patio that will be covered with the sunroom itself. Nothing else as far as that. So that's up to the homeowner if you want to remove more of the patio.
No, my question is, the application, so this is what the applicant submitted. They're saying that the existing coverage is 32.1 and the proposed is 31.9, which suggests that there was some impervious coverage being removed as part of the application. Is that true?
no, I think, yeah, because there is a little walkway, what we have right now, we're not gonna need it no more. Actually driveway to,
Yeah, so that's the walkway
patio.
that will be removed.
So you
That's
will be
correct,
removing
yes.
the walkway then?
it's like from driveway to patio, the walkway we have that, we no longer need that walkway.
And is there, in the existing patio, there looks like there's something that looks almost circular. Is that an outside kitchen or something?
Yeah, and that is also, it's gonna cut up because it's not gonna be circular no more, it's gonna be like straight.
Okay,
So I'm not sure, I don't know the counting wise how much,
Okay.
square feet.
but nonetheless, you said that that you can, if the board was inclined to make it a condition, that you would remove that sidewalk. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That sidewalk, well, I just want to understand that I'm looking where it says paver drive, and then there's a walkway into the sunroom. Is that what you're talking about?
Because we're not gonna have a door there, so that will, we
Yeah.
no longer need that.
That would probably solve the problem, or at least substantially reduce.
Okay, any other,
Mark, what is that 35 feet wide conservation easement into the, another line?
That was put in place at the time of the subdivision. I didn't review this. This is
Okay,
before my
that would be
time.
part of the calculation though for,
Oh, absolutely. That's part of their property. That's just, basically, they can't develop within that easement.
oh, okay.
any other comments or questions? Open to the public. Is there anyone who'd like to make a statement or ask questions concerning the application? If not, then we'll close. Does anybody feel you need any more information?
Just one last thing that I think may help the board's decision, that we do have an ordinance that when you add 1,000 square feet of impervious, You'd have to do some type of stormwater treatment, like a dry well. They have to come in for permits for the work that's been done. I think they're probably gonna end up having to do some type of dry well to mitigate that increase of impervious. So that may weigh in your decision in terms of at least what our stormwater impacts are gonna end up being mitigated by the requirements of the ordinance.
That any approval would be subject to that.
Well, it's already an ordinance requirement, so.
Yeah, I mean, so, but
Okay, then, is there anyone who'd like to offer a motion?
I move that this application be approved, provided that that walkway between the driveway and the new sunroom be removed. And of course, you'll be subject to drainage ordinances.
Did you open it to the public?
Yes.
Oh, you did, okay.
Give a second. Hold the board.
Anthony Caldwell.
Or.
Laura Grauman.
Yes.
Bruce McCracken.
4.
Alan Rich.
Yes.
Robert Shepherd.
Yes.
Gary Rosenthal.
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes, okay, good luck with it. Okay, again with the change in the agenda. Odin Pharmaceutical LLC ZBA 19-00007, application for D1 use variance and C variances, in which for the expansion of the existing building and parking, 300 Franklin Square Drive, Somerset, Block 502.02, Lot 39.05 in the CB zone. This was carried from September 19th with no further notification. Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Peter Lanford appearing on behalf of the applicant. This is an application for, as you indicated, a D1 variance and various C variances and an amended and a site plan approval. We appeared before this board in 2017 when my client purchased the property for a use variance to use this facility for a pharmaceutical manufacturing, storage, labs, and offices. The board granted that approval in 2017. Since that time, the company, in looking at the long-range plans for the site, decided to make a commitment to expand the facility so that they can provide a better operation on the subject property. The addition is a little bit more than 730 square feet as the previous application, but it is an addition. I will have 4 witnesses this evening to review what we are proposing, including the owner of Odin Pharmaceuticals and also the property owner, as well as our site engineer, our architect, and a professional planner. Our traffic consultant is also available if the board has any questions of him. In reviewing the staff reports, traffic did not seem to be an issue, but if any questions arise in the area of traffic, I will be more than happy to have him sworn in and to testify. I will start with my first witness, Mr. Submaranian.
Before you go any further, there's a D1 variance and also a D4, isn't there? Yeah, okay.
FAR variance and also a D1. That is correct.
Okay.
Sir, could you take the microphone in your left hand and raise your right hand?
The other way.
You swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Absolutely.
Your name and address, please.
Virapan Subramanian, 475 Burnsville Road, Mendham, New Jersey.
Could you spell your last name, please?
Subramian.
Thank you.
Virapan, you are the president of Odin Pharmaceuticals?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And prior to establishing Odin Pharmaceuticals, were you involved in another pharmaceutical company here in Franklin Township?
I'll take a few moments to introduce myself, chairman, members of the board, township officials. I've been in this town over would say 17 years doing various businesses. My foray into town was in 2002. I picked up a building, 400 Campus Drive, about 40,000 square foot building, pharmaceutical company, small pharmaceutical company at that time, owned by Bar Pharmaceutical, a major pharma from North Jersey, which was lately bought by Tower Pharmaceuticals. And that company has vacated the building. For 3 years, the building was vacant. I bought the building in 2002. I went to work at the building. By the way, I'm a pharmacist by training, bachelor's, master's, PhD out of Rutgers. And 2002 to 2016, I was on the site. I built the company from nowhere to, when I sold the company to another major company.
What company was that?
Lupin Pharmaceuticals.
Lupin, all right.
And I had created something like 350 jobs, and by the time I left, those numbers have claimed to 450 jobs at the site. We took the site, we expanded the site, we bought a couple of homes right next door to it, built a 106,000 square foot facility. The township has been extremely accommodative, very helpful, very supportive of businesses, and we have done our best trying to bring in jobs and being a good citizens. And I left that location. I do own a company overseas in India with 500 employees in the same pharmaceutical size area as well. We do that's in injectables, ophthalmics. Now we bought this building at 300 Franklin Square Drive back in 2017. The building was vacant again. This building was built by Merck, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies we all know, and this was a center for them to train employees, also do some browsing type of work. The company sold, they moved out of here, sold it to another biotech company 10 years later or so, and the biotech company sold itself to GE, and then it was again vacant. The building was vacant for some time, then it was bought over by a TV shooting company and the television company. They went bankrupt a few years ago. The building was empty again. So I picked up a building, 50,000 square foot, 51,000 square foot footprint, and another 17,000 square foot on top, additional roughly 67,000 square foot building. I met with the township officials as the first starter business, got them agreed to be able to build a pharmaceutical company there, and they were very nice to be able to approve that. I thank you for the committee for approving that. So as we went to put together a plan to make this a company, into a pharmaceutical, to injectable company, we are going to make injections where we sterile injectables, which means it's going to be a very, very clean operation. So as we went to look at things, we had to put a lot of equipment. We had to expand somewhat to be able to accommodate heavy-duty equipment, all fine machinery which are meant to produce injectable pharmaceuticals, a clean operation. So as a result of that, we had to we are in front of the board today asking for some additional room to build and accommodate. That's why we're here, and we are here to be, our building is one of the cleanest buildings, nicest looking buildings there. We want to keep the building the same fashion, even though we'll expand some. We will ensure the look of the building is going to be kept exactly like what Merck envisioned. That's the same class of building it's going to be. We will expand some. That's a necessity for the business. And we are hoping to create at least 200, 250 jobs in a span of probably 4, 5, 6, 7 years. That's our goal. And the pharmaceutical jobs in the injectable space are fairly well-paying jobs. That's our goal. God willing, and with your permission, we'll go to work.
Mayor Pan, getting to the nuts and bolts of the application so the board can make a decision on your request. As I indicated in my opening statement, this will be the corporate offices for the company, and you're there right now operating your offices. Is that correct?
That's right, sir.
Okay. And what we are proposing is to create manufacturing, warehousing, and also laboratories, correct?
Yes.
And if the board were to approve this application, in your statement indicated that you would ultimately have somewhere in the area of about 225 employees.
Yes, sir.
And would that be over one shift, or is this a more than one shift operation?
Of a three-shift operation, we'll have about 50 to 70 people, office areas in a general shift. Then there'll be workers in three-shift operation, roughly 50 workers in each shift.
So I assume the day shift would be your peak shift?
Yes, sir.
And what would the hours of that shift be?
The main shift would be 8 to 5, whereas the workers may come in from 8 to 4, whatever the shift changes will happen. We'll have roughly 100 to 125 employees in the building on the main shift.
Okay, and then you indicated that the second and third shifts would be about 50 employees each, is that correct?
That's how we're envisioning today.
Okay. Now, in addition to and I'll have the architect review the entire building, but in addition to providing the offices and the warehouse and the lab, will there be locker rooms and locker facilities for the employees? Is that required in the business that you operate?
Absolutely. We'll have locker rooms, we'll have cafeterias, we'll have game rooms, we'll have all kinds of amenities for employees to have a good, decent living.
Okay. Now, with respect to the operation itself, will you be having deliveries to the site, and what kind of deliveries will you be getting?
It'll be deliveries, I would say, few trucks in a day, 3-4 trucks in a day may show up. The days there may be no trucks, some vans, those type of things, to deliver material, input material into the what we manufacture, also take of our supplies to outside locations.
Would these be large trucks, you said, or vans, or what kind of deliveries are we talking about?
It'll be a mix of both, ma'am, because some of these would be large trailer tractors. They allow to take product from here to national wholesale warehouses, the McKessons of the world, or the Rite Aid and CVS. They have major warehouses. Our products will go to those locations.
Okay, and when you indicated in your opening remark that you make injectables, what are injectables?
Injectables are medicines meant to be administered directly into the vein or into the muscle that have to, by nature, will be sterile, will be very cleanest of clean. The environment inside the building will be cleanest of clean, not more than 100 particles per square inch. So some of the things are very, very strictly defined, and that's how we have to manufacture product.
And do you make the medicine there, or does the medicine come into the property? How does this all work?
We bring in basic medicines, the chemicals that we buy them from various companies in the world. We go seek their raw materials, and here we bring them and formulate them into specific dosage medicines.
So the medicines are manufactured on the site?
The medicines are compounded and filled into vials and ampules and such on site.
Okay, and then once they're created, then they leave the site?
Yes, sir. They leave the site to go to various channels of distribution, various channels, hospitals and drugstores, wherever they'd be going to. We send it to wholesalers and they send it to various locations.
So this would be like a compound pharmacy, except in the area of injectables?
This is not a compounding pharmacy, man. This is a manufacturing company, real manufacturing company. We'll output as much as 200,000 vials. No compounding pharmacy can do anything remotely close to it. They'll do like 500 or 1,000. They hand manufacture things. These are high-speed machineries. Actually, the same thing what Merck does, what J&J does, we do the same thing. No difference.
Okay. I have no further questions of this witness.
The deliveries that you're talking about, or when the product leaves the plant, these are for more national destinations, you were saying?
When they take our product for distribution, they go to national locations, yes, sir.
So basically what you're talking about is the truck traffic pattern that's directly on and off 287.
Yes, it's within a mile to 287, very close to 87.
it's not, you're not making local deliveries.
No. We only, what we manufacture will go out, it may be a truck or two in a day. That's the maximum we'll be shipping. And sometimes we will receive input materials, that'll be a truck or two in a day.
Will you have trucks of your own, or you mentioned McKesson and other companies that are going to do the distributions? Do you distribute, are you going to have trucks of your own?
Yeah, we do not have trucks of our own, so we usually contract out to people who, many times McKesson itself will come and pick it up from us. Many of those times, these wholesalers have trucks, they'll come and pick from us.
And your deliveries would probably be around the clock? They wouldn't be during the day necessarily, or?
Yeah, typically it's 8 to 5. Usually, we don't have any deliveries, any shipments beyond 8 to 5.
Any other things? We can do the public at the end.
I don't know if there's any public, but sure, we can do it at the end. Okay, I'll move on to my next witness, Kamalish.
Then you take the microphone in your left hand and raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
I do.
Your name and address, please.
Kamlesh Shah, last name S-H-A-H, first name K-A-M-L-E-S-H. Address is 1 Liberty Way in Cranberry, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Kamalish, what is your occupation?
I'm a registered professional architect.
And are you licensed in the state of New Jersey?
Yes, I am.
Can you give the board the benefit of your educational and professional background?
I have a bachelor's degree in architecture, a whole license in the state of New Jersey, New York, and Maryland. Been practicing architecture for the last 20 years on my own.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kamalish, you are going to be relying on 4 exhibits in your testimony?
Yes.
Okay. Before we go into your testimony, I'll have them marked. The first one, which I will mark A1.
Mr. Chairman, can I just, is there any member of the public here for this? I wanted to make sure in case they wanted to see it, but.
Okay, and A1 is can you just indicate what it is very briefly, and then we'll talk about it further?
Right, so A1 shows a picture of the existing building taken from the corner of Davidson Avenue and Franklin Square Road. It's a 2-story space. It looks like it's 1 story, but the part second floor is within, under the roof.
Okay.
That's A1. Oopsie. A2. Exhibit A2 shows the addition that we're making, which is a 1-story addition on the parallel to Davidson Road, and the 2-story addition that we are going to go behind the 1-story addition on the west side, if I may, is that the right direction, of the property.
So that's excuse me, right here. So that particular addition, that's the addition that's going on the side of the building. I'm not so good with the east and west of it, but it's the Davidson Road side of the facility.
Correct.
Which is the main. Now, which side of the building is the front of the building?
The front, their main entrance is from Franklin Square Road. And
Okay.
that's the front of the building. That basically dissects that side.
Yep, so this would be the side?
This will be the side of the building, yes, on Davidson.
Technically, the property has 2 frontages, according to ordinances in the MLU. Also, there are 2 frontages. There's a frontage on Davidson, and there's a frontage on Franklin Square. The entrance to the building is on Franklin Square.
Okay. And the existing building has a section in it that's is the whole building, existing building, 2 stories? Okay, so what you're doing is you're putting part of an addition on that's going to be 2 stories, and you're going to put part of an addition on that's going to be 1 story? That's correct. On that side? Well, I'm afraid he's done testifying.
Yes, you're absolutely right. If you look at the far corner where you see a little sliver of a building, that's the existing building that's basically parallels Franklin Square and Davidson. The building that we're looking at here, it's a 1-story addition, which basically, it looks a little bit taller, but it's the same height as existing building. The backside that you see is a 2-story building. It's still 2 stories, but the height of the floors are taller than the existing building, and it's just 2 stories again.
The height of the floor of the addition?
Addition.
So what's going to happen is that the addition will be taller than the existing building?
Correct.
Okay, now, wait for me. What are they going to be doing in the section that's 1 story tall?
So this portion of the building will house the mechanical equipment, which is critical to the manufacturing, as Mr. Subramanian explained. This is the state-of-the-art injectable facility manufacturing, and the design of the space and the shape of the space, and again, in every FDA-regulated facility, is dependent on the flow, the material flow, personnel flow, equipment flow, and in specific use, which is sterile injectable facility, the adjacencies of equipment is very, very critical. And the way this existing building is now, the loading docks are in the back. And the flow comes from the loading dock, it goes into the front towards Davidson, goes back. It's a unilateral flow. That's what GMP regulation requires. And that is the reason why this 1-story building will house all of the critical equipment that supports the injectable manufacturing equipment. And they need to be, the adjacency is very critical. This is state-of-the-art manufacturing facility. And as Dr. Subramanian said, this is going to be absolutely clean. In an injectable facility, it's class 100,000. And in European term, it's ISO 5, which is the cleanest manufacturing facility you can build. And that's basically, in short, that is going to house some of the critical equipment. Okay.
Can I go, or?
Oh, you can go, but can you ask him what's going to be in the 2-story part?
I think if I get to the next exhibit,
Okay,
I can
good.
probably.
Good. I had a feeling that he's been prepped on this, so.
I mean, if you want, I'll sit down and
It's good.
let you ask the questions. No, I'm just kidding. A3 is.
A3 is it's going to be A3 and 4 probably, because those are the 2 floor plans. This will explain somewhat of the adjacencies that we're talking about. The big white patch that you see is an existing building. The shaded portion is the 1st floor addition on the ground level. The sliver of the space that we're talking about, the rendering that you were looking at, is a 1-story addition. And we'll mark this later, but I just want to explain, just to clarify the 2nd story. This, basically the setback of a building is this 2-story additions. That's the taller part of the building. So this front sliver is basically to house mechanical equipment, and this is the taller part of the building. So if you look at, let's do this here, so that I'll explain. That back part is this building. The front sliver of a building is this. Now,
You indicate that the front has all of the mechanicals.
correct.
What goes on beyond the front in the 2-story building?
So on the ground floor, again, the ground floor is going to house 5 injectable filling lines. There are various different kinds of vials, bottles, bags. And the way it is, and as I was explaining to you, the loading docks are in the back, and the flow is going to be going this way. So this particular corner here, the southwest corner of the building, will house the key filling machines. And that's where all of these clean equipment, all concealed, isolated, clean air, will be located here. And adjacent to them, we need these freezers, huge freezers, boilers, chillers. That's what's going to go here, and that's what's identified, boilers. And then in the waste stream of that, we need to make sure that it's neutralized and all that. So this is strictly housing the equipment supporting the filling lines. And then the first floor, not only the addition, the rest of the floor existing on the lower level will also house the manufacturing end. There's packaging, manufacturing, warehousing, and also support facility for the manufacturing, which is locker rooms, toilets, and respective storage areas.
Okay. And once we leave the first floor and get up to the second floor, what takes place there?
So the second floor, so basically the second floor will house, again, what we're doing also is within the existing building, we're creating an equipment platform. Again, this being a heavy machinery equipment type manufacturing facility, there's a lot of mechanical equipment that we need to locate. Mechanical equipment, in a general sense, can go on the roof. But in this case, because it's sterile, we cannot have the outside air come in and jeopardize the conditioning of the space. We're housing all of the supporting equipment, air handling units, exhaust fans, and things like that on the mezzanine that's going to be within the existing building. The highlighted portion is where, ma'am, you were asking compounding. Compounding, the term compounding is making medicine.
Yeah, well, I understand that.
Yeah, so because in this sense, it's liquid product. So they're going to take active ingredient and put the basic bulk, what is called? It's more liquid, it's water, purified water. They mix them here, it's compounding, and that's fed down into the filling lines. So this up here, they're going to make medicine, and it's going to be fed down with pipes. Everything is very concealed, closed, clean process. So that's what's going to happen. In the top corner, north corner, we're going to have labs. We're going to also have the locker rooms, cafeteria for the staff that's going to be coming into this space and go around in the existing facility existing and proposed facility to work in the space.
Kamlesh, you indicated that by the very nature of what we're doing, a lot of the things that would normally be outside the building or on top of the building are inside.
Correct.
How much square footage basically is being allocated to all of those pieces of equipment?
It's a substantial amount, almost about 30,000 square feet is for mechanical space. Equipment is 30,400 roughly.
And one of the variances that we are asking for is a floor area ratio, but because we have 30,000 square feet within the confines of the building that are strictly mechanical, those are not people spaces. They're just strictly for the material or the equipment that you talked about, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Wait, let me just clarify that, because I think the answer wasn't exactly what you asked. I think you're basically asking, in lieu of putting certain equipment on the roof, you're putting it inside. So I think the question is, what is the square footage of that equipment?
Well, the equipment
What you would normally put on the roof, but you're putting inside.
Well, we haven't calculated foot to foot ratio of how much equipment we put on the roof goes down. But as far as the mechanical platform is concerned, where all of the supporting equipment will go, is approximately 30,000 square feet. That's what is coming up. That's the platform that's going to be in the existing building.
And you're putting it inside for reasons of sterility?
Yes.
Okay.
By the way, Kamlesh, what experience have you had in designing
pharmaceutical facilities?
I've been doing this for the last 15 years out of the 20 years of my practice on my own.
Okay. Now, we did indicate that most of the mechanicals will be inside the building. Will there be anything, any mechanicals or anything outside the building?
There will be. There will be some supporting equipment, which is feeding the cafeterias, the locker rooms, toilets. Those are non-critical spaces that will require normal air, does not have to be filtered. But what is going to happen, they're going to be on the low side of the roof, which is on the existing roof. So you will not basically see them. This high roof will have maybe small pieces of equipment, but majority of the equipment will go on the existing roof, which is basically covered with a high-end addition.
Will there be any other equipment on the ground?
Yes.
Okay.
There will be equipment like transformers, generators, the gas manifold, those things that are restricted and driven by the utility companies, will have to place them where the utilities come in. And those are, we've identified equipment pads, which, again, they're supposed to be outside because it's the transformer, electrical transformer and generator, and the gas manifold that needs to be outside. So those will be located on the exterior of the building.
Okay, and again, and they are going to be fronting on Davidson Avenue, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that is by necessity, or is it by choice?
It is, there are a couple of things. One, the gas and electric is driven by the utility companies. And the chillers, again, the portion of this big pad is going to be taken by chillers. Again, chillers, proximity also makes a big difference because farther it goes, the efficiency goes away. And that's the reason why we need chiller, like other equipment that we're putting inside the building, chiller's going to take up some of the pad as well. Again, that is driven by the proximity of the equipment that we're going to have inside.
Okay, and you heard the testimony of Verapan previously about the other facility that he developed here in Franklin Township. Were you part of the team that developed that facility?
Yes, I was the architect of record.
Okay, and in that facility also, we have the same situation where we had outside chillers and transformers.
Correct.
And we, in fact, screened those from the roadway by way of vegetation and fencing. Is that correct?
That's correct. And the intention here is very similar, and we have something else going for us. And we could show that. I think Matt, the civil engineer, can show us the profile. The advantage that we have is there's a berm right paralleling Davidson, and the berm is higher than the top of the equipment that we're going to have. So you with the line of sight going up, it's going away, but we're also going to have vegetation or evergreens lined up.
All right, and for the record, what is the approximate height of the largest piece of equipment that will be on the ground outside?
Not more than 7 foot, 7.5 feet.
Okay. You also have one other exhibit that we can mark as A4, and can you indicate to the board? I'll mark it for you.
So Exhibit 4, today's date, shows a full rendition of the two-story structure. And this is looking from the south side of the property. And it defines that this little piece here is a one-story existing building. This is the two-story addition, and as you see, we've provided screen on the end of the existing building, but that screen is to provide screening of any ancillary pieces of equipment that's going to go on the roof. So that basically shows a good side of the two-story addition.
And where was this picture taken from?
It's from the parking lot of the adjoining property. I believe this is the hotel.
Okay. And the materials that you will be using to construct the addition, as opposed to the materials that are currently on the building? Can you indicate if they're going to be similar, identical? What are we doing?
Yeah, the existing building is a concrete tilt-up structure. They form concrete panels, lift it, and set it in place, and that is your enclosure. We're planning to use the same system here. The idea is to blend the building, blend the colors, blend the aesthetics aspects of what we have existing, just continue that. So we basically syncing the existing aesthetics with the new building as well. We're using the same colors that are on the existing building, and our client have said that they are going to paint the entire building all around, existing as well as new.
So this is SYNCH, not SINK, right?
That's correct.
You're trying to sync up the two
That's
two
correct.
things. Now, is this the southwest corner of the building we're looking at?
I believe it is south, yes.
Because there's supposed to be an overhead door, and there's also supposed to be a 18 by 30 concrete pad.
That's on this side you're talking about, right?
Well,
That's on the south
I
side.
don't know.
That's this pad here?
Yeah.
Yes.
What's that for?
That's, again, we wanted to calculate the impervious surface going forward, because there may be some ancillary pieces of equipment that we might need. We're better off getting that now than to have that with our previous experience at 400 Campus Drive. We didn't want to come back and say, oh, I need an extra pad. There's always something that we left out. That's mechanical equipment go there.
The problem with that explanation is that it doesn't make any sense if you've got an overhead door, like a big garage door there.
Overhead in here.
Yeah.
Yes, because whatever we put in, it is just for the ease of the staff, winter, snowy. If they have to go there to bring in a drum or something that's outside, it's easy access for them. And again, in this facility, there are big pieces of equipment that comes in and out. It would be better to have that. It's just a placeholder right
So
now.
it's basically a loading dock then?
Well, you can't use that as a loading dock, because there's no way anything can come through. Because the loading docks, just, there's nothing you can pass there.
All right, okay.
Okay, and also from that last Exhibit A4, that shows where the loading docks are and their visibility from the hotel, and the pad site that Mr. Shepherd was asking you about is
Right behind this tree.
right behind that tree and behind that fence.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, I have no further questions.
Anything else from the board?
I have just a question on the trucks that go in there. Are they going to make deliveries during the day?
I guess I'll defer that question
That's
for.
what Mr. Submaranian testified to, that most of the deliveries and trucks that are leaving are during the daylight hours. That is correct.
There's an issue with trucks backing up, and, they go beep, 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 to make a noise.
I don't
Very
believe these trucks
piercing
make
noise.
that kind of noise. I don't believe, these are regular tractor trailers. They won't be, and plus, when Matt comes over for site engineering testimony, there's plenty of space, circulation space, and turning radiuses in the parking lot. It's disrupting none other than their own folks.
Yeah. Somebody told me, well, you live down in Cranberry, right there, where that big warehouse is.
Yes.
That she lives across the way on 130 in Cranberry. And she says she hears in the middle of the night the trucks backing in to the delivery spots.
As a matter of fact, my office is surrounded by all the warehouses. I don't hear the backing up. I hear trucks driving on the road. But
On the road.
I'm maybe mistaken, but these trucks, these big tractor trailers, I don't think when they're backing up, it makes that sound. But that's not my expertise.
Yeah, well, if that's an issue, I would like some condition that it not keep the people that are in the hotel awake.
Well, again, we indicated that all of our tractor-trailer deliveries, both entering and exiting the site, would be during daylight hours, and if that's what the board is concerned about, I'm sure that can be restricted.
I mean, I've been trying to advise both boards to be cautious to condition applications on operations.
Yeah.
Because it's impossible for staff to remember, on this site, they're allowed to do this, on this site, they're allowed to do this. This is a commercial area. They're going to have trucks. It comes down to whether to grant the variance or not, or you have to assume there's going to be trucks. Do they need to do something to screen it acoustically? But having conditions that they can't use a truck after 8 p.m., really impossible for staff to. We have 20,000 sites in town. So you really either approve the use or don't, or impose conditions that are physical conditions, like changing the site plan to mitigate the concerns that you have.
And the other response, Mr. McCracken, also by state statute, we are regulated as far as noise leaving the site, and if in fact, and there's certain requirements that during the daylight hours, there can be so many decibels at the property line, and that number drops to less decibels in the evening. And if it does become a problem where the decibel levels, because of trucks or whatever activity, exceeds those requirements, those are measurables. And then if the owner is violating the state statute, they can be issued a summons, and then they would be required to obviously mitigate that situation. And those things are enforceable.
I'm just thinking that the trucks, if they do have those backup noises, they're also regulated and they have to have them.
Correct.
So I'm wondering whether that's going to be a problem, that's all.
Essentially, during the day, it should
Shouldn't
not
be
be
a
an
problem.
issue.
I think it also depends on it's affected by your circulation plan when you get to that part of it. That may mitigate a lot of things, maybe not as much backing up.
We'll have our site engineer deal with that.
Anything else? Next
Yes, I'm trying to understand, we're talking about the trucks now. I'm trying to understand where on this plan the loading docks are. I'm looking at your plan.
Mr. Shepherd, if you want to wait till the site engineer, it'll probably be easier. He can tell you where they are and and we have truck turning templates and everything. So
Okay.
if you,
I'm perfectly willing to wait.
okay.
Anything else?
You're off the hook.
Next witness.
Matt, thank you very much.
Could you take the microphone in your left hand and raise your right hand? You swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
I do.
Your name and address, please. Hold it close.
Matthew Bursch, Dynamic Engineering, 1904 Main Street, Lake Como, New Jersey, 07791.
Okay, now, when you hold the microphone, hold it 6 inches from your mouth.
Will do.
Okay, good.
And could you spell your last name, please?
That's BERSCH.
6 inches.
Matt, you're a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey,
Yes, I am in good standing.
and how long have you been so licensed?
I've been licensed for almost a year and a half now.
Okay, and you were primarily responsible for generating the site plan, which is the subject of this application?
Yes, I was.
Mr. Chairman, I would offer the testimony of Mr. Bursch as a licensed engineer. You have already put an exhibit on the board. Can you have that marked A5 and indicate what that is?
Will do. So what I have on the easel here is an aerial map exhibit. It's dated 10/3/2019. This exhibit essentially shows an aerial of the subject property. The subject property is located directly in the middle of the exhibit, outlined in a square shape. It depicts the 200-foot property boundary. It also shows the zone boundary. The subject property is located in the CB zone, as you can see in this general area, and then above the thicker line is the M2 zone. For orientation purposes, north will be to the right side of the exhibit, south will obviously be to the left, east is to the bottom, and west is to the north.
Where is Davidson Avenue?
Davidson Avenue is located to the east, which is on the bottom side of the exhibit.
Okay. And can you briefly describe what the surrounding land uses are?
Absolutely. So to the north, we have Franklin Square Drive. Beyond that is an existing mixed office facility. There's multiple tenants within that building. To the west, or the top side of the exhibit, is the Phillips Lighting building. To the south is a Comfort Inn and Suites. And then to the east is Davidson Avenue, which is on the bottom. And beyond that, there's another hotel use and various industrial commercial uses.
Okay. And at the present time, as was indicated by Vera Pan and the other witnesses, access to the subject property is through, not through Davidson Avenue, but through Franklin Square Drive, correct?
That is correct. There's one existing full movement driveway, which is in approximately the center of the site, just to the west of the building. It is full movement. It enters and exits from Franklin Square Drive.
Okay, and the parking is located to the rear of the existing building?
That is correct. The rear of the building is the west side of the site. There's 153 existing parking stalls. There is also a loading zone located in the southwest corner of the property, which is again to the top left of the building.
Can you now take us to what we are proposing, and you have an exhibit to show that?
Yes, I do.
That would be A6, Matt?
So this exhibit is called Site Plan Rendering. It's dated 10/3/2019. It's known as A6 as well. This is a combination of our site plan and landscaping plan. It's a colorized version. Just to introduce some of the colors to the board, the beige color in the center is the existing building. The burnt orange color to the south and southwest or southeast is the proposed building addition. The green areas are obviously landscaping, trees, grass, and then the gray areas to the west of the building are the parking areas, the loading area, and the driveway.
Okay. Now, in addition to the construction of the addition to the building, are we adding any additional parking?
So we are proposing what totals to be 195 parking spaces across the site. This does include 34 banked parking stalls that are located on the northwest corner of the property.
Could you actually stand up and actually make your finger touch the drawing? Thank you.
It's located right here. It's shown as green area because they are banked parking stalls.
But in the site plan that we submitted to the board, we are showing that as parking spaces, but we do not intend to build them based on the expected demand of the owner, but we're showing them because that is the ordinance requirement. Is that correct?
That is correct. Including that number of parking stalls, we meet the ordinance requirement. Based on the demand, we've agreed to bank them. So essentially, we do fall short of the ordinance requirement, but we don't feel that those additional stalls will be necessary.
Okay. Now, since we are adding additional building and we're adding additional parking and even the bank spaces, we have to account for stormwater management, do we not?
Yes, we do.
And how are we doing that?
We're meeting all of the stormwater management regulations outlined by the state local, and SCD standards. We are proposing an underground 48-inch RCP detention system located in the southern side of the parking area.
What does RCP stand for?
Reinforced concrete pipe.
Okay.
Stormwater will be collected by a series of inlets and pipes, will be routed to a manufactured treatment device, which will treat it for water quality, and then it will be routed through this detention basin, and we will also be meeting the runoff quantity standards. So we will meet all of the standards.
Where will all of that be located? Everything that you're describing will be located in that gray area
Correct. It's all underground.
Under the parking lot?
under the parking lot?
We do have yard inlets surrounding the property. Based on the nature of the existing property, there's 12 to 13 feet of grade change from Davidson Avenue to the western side of the property. As such, a lot of the grade wants to drop down from Davidson Avenue to the building.
There'll be pipes under the building going into,
None of the pipes or inlets are under the building. They all are routed around the building. And then they all eventually connect to a manhole in the western corner of the property. That's our ultimate point of analysis, and we meet all of the standards.
Where does it go after it leaves the manhole?
There's a,
Just please put your finger on the,
so there's another stormwater basin further to the west. There's an easement through the adjacent property. Eventually, all of the runoff from our property is routed to that basin.
And is that where it currently goes today for the building that currently exists?
That is correct.
And in accordance with the applicable standards, we are required to detain the water so that the runoff that will be leaving this site will be at a less rate than it is today, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Are we adding any additional lighting?
So we are proposing 5 new freestanding light fixtures located really around the outside of the parking area. We are also relamping 6 of the existing freestanding light fixtures. Those 6 fixtures are double lamps, so essentially
could you show us where they are?
they're located throughout the entire parking area. There's one here, here, and then in these interior islands.
Okay.
There's a total of 11 freestanding lights, and then we're also proposing 5 building-mounted lights on the new building addition section.
And all of the lighting will be shining inwards and no light will leave the subject property, is that correct?
That's correct. They're new LED fixtures. They're becoming the norm. They have a low-profile, sleek design. They have internal cutoffs to help maintain light on the site and not allow light to drift off-site.
Okay. The question that was asked by Mr. Shepherd a little bit earlier about a tractor trailer is either coming to pick something up or to drop something off. How does the tractor trailer circulation work?
Sure. I have another exhibit that I'd like to present.
And that would be A7, is it?
Yes. This exhibit is actually sheet 20 in our site plan set. It shows it's a vehicle circulation plan. It's dated 1/30/2019. It essentially depicts a W50 tractor trailer truck entering through the eastern Franklin Square driveway, circulating over to the 4 loading bays, which are on the southwest corner of the building, facing towards the parking area. And then this exhibit shows 3 WB50 trucks sitting in the loading zone and still allowing a 4th to get through and to access the loading zone. We don't think that'll ever be the case. This is worst case scenario, and the deliveries can be controlled by the operator, and so the truck can come on site, can back into the 4 loading bays, one of those being oversized, and it can circulate out through the northwest driveway located along Franklin Square Drive.
So in essence, the truck would enter through what is basically the existing driveway, and then be able to make one movement to back into the loading docks, is that correct?
That is correct.
And then when leaving, it would leave straight out and use the new driveway that we are creating, so that if these trucks do make any noise, they wouldn't make any noise when they're leaving because they would be going straight. And if they do beep, it would only be that one movement when they're backing into the dock, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
All of the drive aisles and driveways are designed to meet the township's ordinance requirements. They're safe and efficient, provide adequate radii for truck circulation.
Okay, now, we were looking at some pictures before of the building, and the pictures were taken from the parking lot of the hotel, and there was a wooden fence there. How does that, where's the hotel on your drawing there?
The hotel is located on the left side of this exhibit. It's southwest of our building.
So is that, can I actually see that fence there? Is that what I'm looking at or not?
Just to try to show you both
Sure,
exhibits
good.
at one time.
Good.
So this view
Yeah,
is from about this vantage point.
okay,
Again, west of our building, facing towards the loading docks.
okay,
So the fence runs along the property line here. There's an existing retaining wall, or I'm sorry, a proposed retaining wall along the property line. The fence will be on top of that and continue all the way to the western property line.
okay. So that line there, put your finger on it for me, there you go. That is the fence, right, running up and down?
Correct.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Matt, did you make any provisions for garbage?
I'm going to reintroduce the site plan rendering, which was A6. There's a proposed trash compactor located in the western corner of the building, adjacent to the 4 loading bays. This trash compactor will collect all sorts of trash from the development. Recycling will be collected in separate bins, and we anticipate these items will be picked up 1 to 2 times per week by a private local hauler.
Well, now, where's the southwestern corner of the building?
That's this corner right here.
Okay. Where is the 20 by 40 cement pad that's there with an overhead door?
It's
Right there, right?
correct.
So that's where the compactor's going?
No, the compactor is going on the west side of the building. This pad is on the south side of the
Okay,
building.
all right, good. So then the compactor is facing the same direction as the loading bay docks?
Correct. It's sitting in the same direction as the trucks would park when they're loading and unloading.
Okay, so because of the fact that we're proposing to handle waste through a compactor, there's no need for any dumpsters or anything of that nature on the site, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Let's move on to the issue of landscaping and screening. You already addressed the fact that there will be a fence installed along the southerly side of the property between our site and the hotel site, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Wait a minute, isn't there a fence there already?
I believe you can.
What was that fence we were just looking at? You put your finger on?
That's proposed. That's a proposed fence and building shown from what it would look
Okay,
like.
so
in
that's a
condition.
proposed fence?
Correct.
All right,
It's a proposed 8-foot PVC fence.
okay.
So that is the fence that Peter was just speaking about that runs along the entire southwest property
Good.
line.
All right. Now, at the present time, there are numerous trees on the property, both along Davidson Avenue, Franklin Square Drive, and
what is our intent with respect to the existing trees and also additional landscaping, since we're doing certain things to the property frontage along Davidson Avenue?
After our first submission, we met with
Matt, microphone.
we met with some of the township professionals to speak about the application. They made a comment that we should try to maintain as many of the existing trees on site as possible. As such, we redesigned the grading along Davidson Avenue. We're now proposing a small retaining wall on the southeast side of the site that runs along Davidson Avenue. It's only 2.5, 3 feet tall at the maximum. We're providing 82 arborvitae trees on top of that wall to help screen all of the operations that will be on the southwest side of the building. Essentially the utilities that Kamlesh had testified to. In addition, we are proposing a fence in that area to also help to screen those utilities. We show it as a PVC fence. We're willing to make it a chain link with green privacy slats to kind of blend into the arborvitaes that we're proposing in that area. So that's what we're trying to do to screen the southeast corner of the building. We're also proposing 10 new shade trees along Davidson Avenue to supplement the existing trees and also replace some of the trees that will be removed as a result of this building addition. We've also modified our grading to maintain all of the existing trees along Franklin Square Drive, and because we're banking the parking stalls in the north corner of the site, we're also maintaining the trees there.
Okay. And you also heard Kamlesh testify as to the fact that the building itself is lower, or the base of, or the floor of the building is lower than Davidson Avenue. Did you prepare an exhibit for the board to show what the motorist who's traveling down Davidson Avenue would see with respect to that as compared to the mechanical equipment that Kamlesh testified to?
Yes, I did.
And can we mark that as A9?
So this is a sightline profile. It essentially shows the elevations as a car driving on Davidson Avenue, what they would see as they're looking at the southeast corner of the building. So the car driving on Davidson Avenue heading north-south. This is the sightline. It's the darker black line. This is the existing trees that are in that area. These are the proposed arborvitae trees. They're shown at 8 feet. Typically, they're planted at 6 feet. They grow approximately 2 feet per year, so this would be in a 2-year condition. This small gray rectangle is the 2.5 to 3 foot retaining wall, and then this box here is just our representation of the 7 foot tall mechanical equipment in that general area. So based on this sightline and the fence shown here, we don't believe that you'll be able to actually see any of the mechanical equipment as a result of the proposed landscaping and the fence in that area.
Is that similar then for the other corner of the building?
We didn't provide a profile of the other corner of the building. There's no utilities in that area. It'll essentially look like the rest of the facade of the building. But it is a relatively similar condition without the landscaping, without the retaining wall, and without the fence.
I think the architect had an exhibit showing that. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do have the photo inlay exhibit. So this is the photo inlay that Kamlesh had testified to previously. It's located on the southeast corner of the site within Davidson Avenue. And I believe this is right here is the view that you were speaking of. You can see that the door is actually lower than the grass around it, so the grade does drop there.
Okay, and Matt, that exhibit shows the new building, but does not show any of the additional landscaping that we are proposing along the front of the property, the arborvitae or anything of that nature. That basically shows the building with the existing trees that are currently there, is that correct?
That's partially correct. So the existing trees are located on the right side of the exhibit, and our proposed landscaping, the arborvitaes and the fence and the utilities are over here. You can barely see them from this angle. These are proposed shade trees. These are 10 proposed shade trees.
So then we have one side of that side of the building that faces Davidson. One side has arborvitaes, existing trees, and new trees, and the other side of that property has looks like 4 trees and no arborvitaes and nothing.
We would be willing to supplement the landscaping in that area. We can work with your engineer and planner in order to do that. I don't see why that would be an issue.
I think maybe, you need to work with Mark or something. It is a frontage on Davidson Avenue. I think it should be landscaped as though it were the front of a building. There's an awful lot of wall there that you don't see in a normal building front because they have other decorative features in the front of it. This is built like the side of a building. I understand that. Now I think I would like to see it mitigated a little bit so it fits in the rest of the streetscape.
Mr. Thomas, my client would be more than happy to sit down and add additional landscaping. It's our intent to make this building probably the most attractive building on Davidson, so if additional landscaping is necessary along the front of it, whether it's plants or whether it's trees, we will be glad to work with Mr. Healy, and we'll have a landscape architect reach out to him to do that.
Right, that's good. I don't think we need to get into what every individual plant is going to be planted there, but
Well, they're looking for a variance for the front yard setback off of Davidson, I think, right?
That is-
So
Yes.
that would really mitigate the,
I think
The
more is
problem.
better.
And we have no problem doing that, so we would be glad to supplement the proposed landscaping.
Mr. Lanford, can you have the engineer go through the variances, just so?
I was gonna have Mr. Phillips do that, but I can have, ma'am, why don't you run through the
But
variance?
it may,
Yes.
some of these variances may speak to what the engineer may or may not do with the plan. The planner comes on to justify them, but I think
Right.
the board needs to know what those variances are.
All right, ma'am, why don't you run through the variances very briefly?
Absolutely.
And I'm talking about the C variances, not the D variances.
I'm going to reintroduce the site plan rendering. This is A6. So we're proposing a front yard setback variance. We're proposing 46.4 feet, whereas the requirement is 75 feet, as shown by this dashed line that runs parallel to Davidson Avenue.
So just so the board is clear, the existing building is set back 75 feet?
Yes, the southern corner of the building is 75 feet. So with the bump out of 22 feet that runs in line with the existing building, we are proposing 46.4 feet setback from the property line there.
Okay.
The next one, we are proposing a side yard setback variance located on the southwest side of the building. The property line runs up and down the side of this page, and obviously the building, it runs parallel to that. We're proposing 20.5 feet, whereas the requirement is 50. We are also proposing a variance for the maximum lot coverage. We're proposing 30.3%, whereas the requirement is 30%. So we're just slightly over. We are also proposing 69.6% impervious coverage on site, whereas the requirement is 55. That is reduced as a result of the banked parking stalls, but we are asking for the variance as if the parking stalls were built out.
Well, yeah, let me just clarify that. So there is no parking variance. So the way that land banking spaces work here is, well, first of all, your parking requirement is 178. You're proposing to install 161. You have 34 banked. So you have 195 spaces on your plan. 195 versus the 178, so you comply. So you don't need a parking variance.
Correct.
And the way that the parking works, the land banking works, and I think the board is probably aware of this, is it's on the site plan. They have to fully engineer it. At this point, they're not proposing to, because they're going to, they basically are telling you that they don't think they need it. But if in the future they do decide they need it, they can then go build it. Or on the flip side, if they have a parking problem and they're parking all over Franklin Square Drive, the zoning officer can make them improve it. And it's there basically kind of ready to go. Really, all you're doing is basically allowing the, putting those 34 spaces on ice until if they're ever needed.
So essentially what he's saying is that the impervious coverage is calculated as though
Yes.
those were built out, although for the moment, it's much less impervious.
And
coverage.
similarly, you count it towards the parking requirement because they are on the site plan, but again, you're basically allowing them not to improve it.
What is the impervious coverage if you don't consider those parking spaces as having been created?
So the impervious coverage, if they're not created, I believe it's about 10,400 square feet less of impervious coverage. It brings the percentage to 65.3%.
And what is it, otherwise 66?
69.6.
69.
So it's a reduction of 4.3 or so, 4.3%.
And just for the record, the stormwater management system that you designed also takes into account the building of those parking spaces, even though they may never be built. So if they're built, stormwater management has already been handled. Is that correct?
That is correct. Moving on.
Moving on.
We're requesting a variance for parking in the front yard. We have 2 road frontages. We have parking along Franklin Square Drive within the 75-foot setback.
Is that shown there?
So we have the banked parking stalls shown. So we are requesting a variance for that. I believe there's 3 stalls all the way on the northwest corner of the site that are also within that front yard. So yes, they are shown. They're just difficult to see on this rendering.
No, you're going to have to help me with this, because it makes it sound from what I've seen, I thought that there were going to be, parking spaces, for example, in between the road on the side here and the building, but there's not.
There is no parking.
Good, you're getting the pointing thing down. Good. So there's no parking spaces there.
Correct.
And there's no parking spaces on Davidson Avenue side.
Correct.
The only parking spaces, most of the parking spaces on what would be considered the front yard of the building is on the far side of the driveway, and I can't see it, but you're telling me that there are a couple spaces that have already been, stalls that have been created, but that those all would continue to fall in the banked, everything else would be in that banked parking area.
With the exception of the 3 stalls in this area. So yes, the banked parking stalls are essentially in the middle of the existing driveway located right here and the proposed driveway. So they're in this green space. There's no parking in any of the green space down here.
Okay, so let's say, I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but all of a sudden you decide you need 20 more spaces of parking. Does that mean that entire green section goes away? That's on the far side of the existing driveway.
Yes. This is
That'll becomes gray.
correct. But we don't anticipate needing it at this point, so we'd rather leave it green.
Heard that before, but okay, fine.
So what I would suggest is, again, as indicated before, when they do land banking, they're supposed to show the site plan as if it's going to be built. What I would suggest is 90% of the variance for this front yard setback is the land bank spaces. So the landscaping plan should show screening of that parking area if that area was to be built. And it'd be kind of like a subset on the plan, and they do this all the time. So I would suggest they have some type of, whether it's street trees, a low hedge, something like that. Again, if they were to build that parking lot, then that landscaping would go in.
We can absolutely do that.
Okay. And the other thing, just to further clarify one point, adjacent to our property, to the rear of the parking, our parking, proposed parking and the land bank parking, what's located behind us?
There's another parking lot associated with the Phillips Electric building. And then the Franklin Square Drive essentially ends right at the top of our page. That becomes the Phillips building.
So our parking lot is basically abutting another parking lot?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's also parking along this side as well, the southwest side.
Okay.
Because that's where the hotel is, right?
Correct.
All right.
Have you now covered all the variances?
There's one more. It's a front yard setback for an accessory structure. It's located up here along Davidson Avenue. Setback, we have the proposed chiller pads on this, we'll call it beige rectangular area. And this pad is set back 59 or so feet from Davidson Avenue, where it has to comply with the front yard setback for the principal building structure.
Okay, so there's a piece of building right next to those pads, right?
So
Those are pads.
correct.
Finger that way just a little bit to the left there. That's building, right?
Correct.
How far back is that from the street?
It's 46.4 feet. That's the front yard setback that I mentioned first.
So in other words, those chiller pads would be set back further than the piece of building?
From the closest point to Davidson Avenue, yes.
All right.
And just to be clear, Matt, the 46 feet is the closest point to Davidson Avenue, and the building actually angles away from Davidson Avenue, and the distance between Davidson Avenue and the building as you're going north gets greater and greater. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now have you got all the variances?
Those are all the variances.
Thank you, then I have no further questions.
Okay, anything else from the board?
Do you have any comments on staff
I'm
comments?
sorry, Mark.
Is there any staff comments you cannot comply with?
Now, we've reviewed, and just for the record, I'll do it very quickly. We have your report dated August 21st, 2019, the report of John House dated June 26th, 2019, Franklin Township Sewerage Authority dated September 16th, 2019, Patty Elliott, Board of Health, September 9th, 2019, Public Works has no comments, Police dated September 12th, 2019, and there are no comments there. And then we have the CME report dated September 11th, 2019. Matt, you've reviewed every one of those reports, is that correct?
Yes.
And some of those reports have some recommended modifications to the plan. Can we make all of those modifications?
I would say the CME report and the planner's report, we can comply with those. The police, we can comply. And then I think there's
Anything you can't,
we can.
that you cannot comply
No,
with?
we can comply.
Yeah.
What about
With everything.
8D?
Correct.
What about 8D in Mark Healy's report? Looks like you're seeking a waiver there. Waiver. So that doesn't sound like you're going to comply.
Sorry, which one, Mr. Shepherd?
8D?
Page 6.
That is correct. We are seeking a waiver. But we agreed to supplement landscaping throughout the development, so may reduce that waiver. We can work with the planner to provide the additional trees.
Okay, so then they will comply, all right.
Okay, and Matt, just with respect to all of those changes that are requested in the reports that we referred to this evening, if we were to make all of those changes, would that substantially alter the plan that the board is looking at, or are they mostly minor modifications?
They're mostly minor.
Thank you. No further questions.
Just to be
Okay,
clear, I think
anything
that
else from the board?
we heard two different things. You're going to revise the plan, with regard to 8D, you're going to revise the plans to,
We're probably gonna need a waiver, but not as much of a waiver as we were seeking before.
okay, just wanted to make that
Just to
clear.
make the record clear.
Okay.
That will be part of the landscaping discussion.
For the record, I'd like to say that the report that Mark Healy did for this particular application was not only comprehensive, but comprehensible, and it was very, very helpful.
Anything else from the witness?
Are you suggesting that some of his other reports are not helpful?
You know, something, you gotta ruin it. You gotta ruin it, don't you?
I was lucid that day.
Okay, next witness.
Okay,
Great work, Mark.
Mr. Phillips.
Could you take the microphone in your left hand? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Name and address, please.
Paul Phillips, Phillips. The firm is Phillips Price. The address is 33-41 Newark Street, Hoboken, New Jersey.
Mr. Phillips, what is your occupation?
I am a professional planner.
And are you licensed in the state of New Jersey?
I am indeed.
And can you give the board the benefit of your educational and professional background unless Mr. Thomas is willing to waive it?
We're going to waive it, just move on.
Okay. You've testified.
I've appeared before this board on a number of occasions in the past.
Okay.
We remember.
And Mr. Phillips, you are familiar with the master plan of the Township of Franklin, the zoning ordinance of the Township of Franklin. You have visited the subject property and have reviewed the plans that are before the board this evening, have you not?
I have done all of those things.
Okay. And you've heard Mr. Bursch outline the C variances that we are seeking, and also in this application before the board this evening, there are 2 D variances that we are seeking. Is that correct?
Correct.
Would you like to indicate to the board what those variances are and then go through the proofs that are required to justify those variances as well as the C variances?
Sure. So this property is located in your CB Corporate Business District. It does permit the office and lab components. It does not permit the manufacturing and warehousing components. Back in 2017, this board granted the D variance to allow the manufacturing and warehouse functions. The applicant, as we've indicated, also exceeds the FAR in the district, which is also a D4 variance, and then there are a number of C variances that you just heard our site engineer testify to: front yard setback, side yard setback, building coverage, impervious coverage, parking in the front yard, and the accessory structures in the front yard. In terms of the planning proofs, as I mentioned, the D1 use variance was previously granted by this board back in 2017. I had the benefit of reviewing that resolution of approval. I think the basis for the board's grant of that approval remains valid as applied to this particular application. And indeed, the rationale and the planning proofs in support of that D1 use variance were set forth in the zoning board's resolution of approval, which was dated June 15, 2017. With regard to the D4 FAR variance, just to put the calculations, the current FAR in the site is 0.28. The CB district allows an FAR up to 0.4, and the applicant is proposing an FAR of 0.56. As the board is aware, the proof requirements for an FAR variance are less burdensome than a D1 use variance, as they basically are the outgrowth of a case known as Randolph Town Center. Essentially, an applicant has to demonstrate to the board that, notwithstanding the deviation sought, that the site can overcome and the development can overcome any problems associated with the fact that the applicant doesn't comply with the FAR standard. In that vein, I think there are some unique circumstances here, and I think you've heard a preview of that from prior witnesses with regard to the specifics of the development that I think will allow the site to function in a way that it can accommodate the proposed FAR. Let me just also say that I think there's two, from a regulatory standpoint, there's two purposes to an FAR as a planner looks at it. One is to control the intensity of use, and the other is to basically control sort of the scale and size of a building per se. I think the intensity is the principal reason, and I think secondarily to control the mass of the building.
Mr. Phillips, can you quickly describe, it was in my report, but just quickly describe what floor area ratio is? How
Yeah,
it's
floor
measured?
area ratio is essentially a calculation of the amount of floor area that's built within the entire building, no matter how many floors, as compared to the site per se. So basically, for this site, what's allowed is 0.4. You would basically take the total site area, which is, I think, just over somewhere 5+ acres. You'd basically take that, multiply that times 43,560, and then you'd apply the 0.4 percentage, and that would be your allowable floor area. And again, we're at 0.56. I think the key here is that over 40% of the floor area that's proposed as part of the expansion is basically for the equipment platform, as opposed to the southerly building addition. And the equipment platform is proposed to basically be installed at the second level of the existing building, such that from the standpoint of the mass, which is again the second point of having an FAR requirement, it will not be visible since it's not adding basically to what's there now, which is that second story of the building. It will also not contain any type of employee space. There's no offices, there's no manufacturing component, there's no business activity, there's no employees. There's an equipment platform that's basically meant to handle the specialized manufacturing process and air handling that was described by a prior witness. However, technically, notwithstanding that, it has to be included in the FAR requirement.
But wait a minute, I think you're only describing the addition part. There is a lot of different things that go on that second floor when I listen to both the architect and the owner of the building. So are you saying that we want to look separately at the additional space and not look at the entire?
Putting the platform aside, dealing with the building addition, which is here, yes, that's multiple stories except for the small portion in the front. The equipment platform is going within the existing footprint of the building that's there per se on the second floor. So it's not increasing the mass of that particular portion of the building. And that equipment platform accounts for over 40% of the proposed ask in terms of the excess floor area ratio. I just did a calculation, and again, dealing with intensity of use, if you just back out that space, if you back out the equipment platform, the FAR here would be about 0.44 with the basically two-story addition on the southerly portion of the building. What's allowed is 0.4. It's not a significant deviation. The other critical thing that I looked at is, remember, you granted a use variance for this property to allow manufacturing and warehouse. The CB zone didn't intend it. It had a lower FAR than other zones that allow manufacturing and warehousing. And I just looked at your M2 district, which, as you heard from the site engineer, is close by. The M2 district actually allows an FAR of 0.5 for this type of use, and it allows these uses. So we're at, whether you look at it backing out the platform at 0.44 or even including it, we're at 0.56. So I don't think this ask is egregious in the context of the use per se. With regard to the other thing I point out is and I discussed this with Mr. Healy beforehand, that the township recently prepared a master plan update back in May of this year. It has not been adopted. However, it's interesting. It actually is proposing the consolidation of the three zones in this area, CB, M1 and M2, and basically would set forth a whole new list of regulations. And interestingly enough, the regulation, it would be a BI district, business industry. The FAR as proposed would be 0.5. So again, right in what is allowed in the M2.
Yeah, but you see, there'd be a lot of manufacturing equipment in any kind of a building within that zone, and you're still above, you're at a .56.
Yeah.
And what concerns me about this development is the intensity, and as it's compared to the other buildings in the area. This is basically a corporate campus area, and now we've got a building that's basically busting at the seams of where it's the permitted use and development.
Respectfully, I'm not quite sure I'd characterize it the same way. I think we're in the range, and I think if you basically look at the .44 backing out and then the .56 if you don't back out, and looking at either M2 or what's proposed for this new zone at .5, I think we're there. And I think that the ask in terms of the .56 isn't egregious. And I think the fact that 40% of that space is for mechanical equipment does not indeed add to the intensity of the use. That's why I did the calculation just for informational purposes to sort of back that out to give you some particular framework in that regard. So I don't see that the granting of this FAR variance will have significant detrimental impact either on the surrounding area, and particularly since a good portion of it is being accommodated within the existing footprint of the building. And I don't see it being substantially detrimental to the zone plan, either the existing, based on the numbers that I shared with you, or what has been proposed. With regard to the C variances, the C variances, I think, are also to some extent subsumed within the D variance. Again, recognizing that what's proposed here in terms of the use was not contemplated in the CB district, but would be contemplated in the new zone. And as your attorney and planner know, there's a case out there called Price versus Hameji, which is probably now a 6-7-year-old New Jersey Supreme Court case that says often when you give a use variances, the bulk variances are subsumed because the underlying zoning didn't anticipate the same development standards as was approved. I think that the C variances are largely C2 type variances here, flexible C type variances where the benefits of granting the relief would outweigh the detriments, and I think several purposes of the statute would be advanced. So let me, I also believe we can satisfy the negative criteria. Let me go through the bulk variances.
Well, just before you do that, are you approaching this from the point of view of that there's a hardship, or are you just?
No, C2.
Okay.
Flexible C.
All right.
Yeah. So let's deal with the front and side yard setback. You've heard a bit about this from our engineer. So the addition is proposed in the southerly portion of the building, as you can see on A6. The applicant is proposing a two-story addition. It's, I think, 47 feet high, except for the one-story addition, which is lower in the front. At its worst point, the setback would be 46.4 feet, where 75 feet is required. And I think we talked about this a little bit. The existing, if you look at the existing building, which is here, this setback is actually at the 75-foot measurement. And because of the angle of the building relative to the street, the setback of the existing building as you move further toward Franklin Square Drive is actually somewhat
Say that again.
larger.
Could you say that again?
What I'm saying is that right now, right, forget the addition, this corner of the building was set at the 75-foot required minimum setback, which means because of the angle of the building relative to the street, Davidson Avenue, that the remainder of the building, as you move away from this point, actually has a larger than 75-foot setback. So a couple of things in that regard. Again, for informational purposes, I took a look at the M2 district and this proposed new BI district, and their front yard setback proposed would be 50 feet. Again, not too far from what we'd be proposing here in the front yard. And the side yard setback would be 10 feet. And as you heard, we're proposing a side yard setback of 20.5 feet. I also, if you take a look at this building, is that probably the bulk of the building in the front yard, if you take the front face of the building, notwithstanding that we're at 46 feet and change here, actually probably half of this building would still be in compliance with the 75-foot front yard. It basically, the deviation is really centered on this southerly portion of the site because of
And
the
the
angle.
pads.
Yeah, because of
And the
the
pads,
angle of
right.
the angle of the building. I would also just offer that, setback is related to height. All else being equal, for light air and open space, you want greater setbacks for buildings that are greater height. We're not tapped out in terms of the height. This zone allows 65-foot high buildings. We're at 47 feet here, and even in this portion here, which encroaches in the front yard, we're at 25, about 25 feet on the height of the building, that front portion? 26, close enough. So, so we're not basically using up the height. As you heard, also, we are proposing some plantings to mitigate, and I think you heard the applicant make an offer based on the suggestion of a number of the board members and professionals. We would agree to do additional plantings subject to your review by your professionals in that front yard to mitigate those impacts. So I think, again, based on C2 criteria, the sort of the benefits of allowing this pharmaceutical operation to occur here as intended, I think the building is generally compatible in terms of the scale and appearance of the area. And I think the other key thing is that the applicant can continue to maintain sort of the landscape green space, campus-like setting in both of the front yards, notwithstanding the setback, which I think is important and I think is highlighted in your master plan. Along both front yards, there is green space. And the other thing, and I'm not really arguing C1 hardship, but we do have two front yards here.
I was wondering if you were going to try that.
I didn't miss
All
that.
right.
I didn't miss that. We do have two front yards here, and this building along the Franklin Square Drive is set back more than here's the 75-foot line, so it's roughly 80 and change setback per se. I think you heard from the applicant that due to its operational needs, it does need some accessory equipment in the front yard, the chiller, the transformer, and the generator. I think the thing here is that the level of those structures are probably, I'm going to guess, about 8 feet below the level of Davidson Avenue, and they would be screened by the double row of arborvitaes as well as some kind of fencing. I think we've offered whatever's suitable to the board and its professionals per se.
I thought it was sad that he recommended chain link fence, but.
Whatever,
right.
I think the applicant's amenable to whatever the board thinks is aesthetically best.
Right. So, but they're now going to extend that, the arborvitae, et cetera, across the entire front. I think it was the part of the discussion. Arborvitae and the other green space.
Whatever's deemed suitable, we're willing to do. Again, just for informational purposes, the setback, the required front yard setback in M2 and the proposed BI is 50 feet, so I think you heard 59 feet. We'd actually be within that. If we weren't in the zone and we were in an M2 where the use is permitted, we'd actually be in compliance with that. The parking in the front yard, you've heard, this really has to do largely with the banked parking per se. The applicant's indicated that he believes he doesn't need that parking. Again, to some extent, we've got the two front yards. I think it's great that all the parking's in the rear and not visible from particularly Davidson, which is where there's most traffic in terms of the public view shed, but also the front portion of Franklin Square Drive per se. Again, I think in terms of the bank parking, it would be a portion of one row of spaces that would actually be, that's all that would actually be within that 75-foot setback area per se, if the bank parking were to be built. And I think that, again, the benefits of this variance, sufficient parking on the site, adequate space for the loading area, and keeping the parking behind the building would outweigh the detrimental impacts of this particular variance. And then lastly, there's the coverage, both building and impervious. And again, I think what's being proposed is not out of line with the zones that permit the use, specifically M2. Even the building coverage, even under the underlying CB zone, it's 30.3% versus 30%. That's obviously de minimis. I don't think any one of us in this room can say they can tell the difference between 30 and 30.3%. But I think the more important variance is the impervious coverage variance here. And as you heard, we would be seeking to do 69.5%, where 55% is permitted. However, again, this includes the bank parking area. If we had to basically use that for parking, as you heard from our engineer, if you back that out, you're basically at about 65%, which incidentally is the allowable coverage in the M2 district. So I think that this variance, I think, also can be granted to allow this site to appropriately function for the approved use, and I think that would outweigh any detrimental impacts. And also, I would just note that we are proposing some landscaping improvements in the parking area as well, parking islands and some additional trees in the front yard of Davidson. And then just lastly, since I'm arguing C2 variance, in terms of the purposes of zoning, I think that purpose A, which is to guide development in a manner that promotes the public welfare, purpose G, which is to provide sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of uses, and purpose M, which is to promote a more efficient use of land, would apply here in terms of those C2 variances. And I think that I've covered everything, Mr. Lanford, but
I believe you have, so I'm not going to ask you any further questions. I will turn you over to the board.
Anything from the board?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have two questions. The side yard of 20 feet, do you have, how's that side yard being mitigated?
So, yeah, so you've heard that there's a fencing, but I think the key mitigation, Mark, is that if you look at the hotel property per se, the hotel is basically well set back from the side yard, and it's also set back from where the building expansion is proposed. So from the standpoint of light air and open space, which is probably the main benefit from having a side yard setback, I think you basically have parking for the hotel there. And again, because the building is located further back and is nowhere close to that side yard, I think that you can basically grant that variance. I know there's the fencing proposed there as well to kind of separate the uses. And again, the only other thing I could add is in the M district, it's even lesser. I think it's a 10-foot side yard. So I think this site, given where the hotel is located, the building is located, and that's both to Davidson Avenue as well as to this side yard setback line. I think the site can basically function, notwithstanding that deficiency, given that context.
I think, yeah, I think I hear with regard to the hotel building, but I think also that location, driving northbound on Davidson Avenue, that's where this building is going to become the most visible. And because of the relatively small setback, because there's, I guess an area that's supposed to be usable, and then that retaining wall, there's just no opportunity.
Are you looking for more screening plantings?
But I don't know how you do that, because you have the retaining wall right on the property line. And the trees on that adjoining property are most likely going to come down because they're on the property line, right with the retaining wall.
You're right.
So you're going to have this 48-foot tall building with basically no screening.
So obviously, we can't screen past our property line, which your concern is obviously the view shed. I don't know what else we can do. I mean, we probably don't have any. Do we have any room to landscape with the fencing in place? I'll defer to the site engineer on that. Maybe you can do something in the front portion that might help to some extent, but I'll defer to our site engineer on that. You understand what he's asking, right?
I think there's a few things we could do with regards to the retaining wall and fence in that area. We might be able to pull it closer to the building to provide some additional space on the property line side of that retaining wall, to provide some additional landscaping. We do slope 3 to 1.
What retaining wall? Are we talking about the board wall that we had you trace before? My question is why don't they just put something like arborvitae or rockets or some evergreen tree in between that wall or that fence that's going to go up to separate the properties and the building?
So there is a small retaining wall coming off of the southern corner of the building and running along the property line.
Okay.
That's a factor of 6 feet of grade change from Davidson down to our finished floor, which is at 66.
Yeah.
So we have a small retaining wall here. This was supposed to be some usable outdoor space for the employees, common areas, picnic tables and whatnot.
Yeah.
But we would be willing to push that retaining wall in slightly, add some landscaping. We're willing to work with the planner in order to screen this corner of the building a little bit more. We have no issues with that.
As he pointed out, it's a 48-foot long stretch of a side of a building, so I think that the corner's not the only thing they're concerned about. But I appreciate the thought that you might want to be able to allow the employees to use it. But I think there should be some further thought being given to that.
Sure, and if it's a matter of adding additional shade tree or two up in this corner, we would absolutely be willing to work with the planner.
My second question really is more, and I know, Mr. Phillips, you had mentioned it to me in the hallway, but hearing the testimony, I'm a little troubled by the use of relying on a draft master plan and a draft ordinance. There hasn't been a hearing, not finished. The planning board did have comments on it. Staff is going to be returning back to the planning board with a revised draft of that master plan, a revised draft of the ordinance, before there's even a hearing on that master plan and before that ordinance is sent to council for introduction. So, do you have any modifications to your testimony that you'd want to provide, not relying upon that draft master plan?
So, again, yes, it hasn't been adopted, which I testified to, Mark, and, but, I mean, I brought it up in part for informational purposes, and in part because the township staff and professionals undertook the study, and I kind of saw that there was a need for that this area may warrant some zoning changes. And I think it was important in the context of this application for the board to know that. But I think the other key thing, which was part of my testimony, and again, this goes to Price versus Himeji, is that the CB zone, basically the standards were designed for largely office-type buildings and not manufacturing and warehousing type buildings. So again, for guidance, I mean, still have to put our proofs in, but for guidance, that's why I also look to the M2 district, which is obviously close by as well, to see that for this type of use in the zone that envisions and permits this use, how would we comport vis-a-vis those standards? And based on the testimony that I set forth, I think we comport favorably vis-a-vis those standards, or close to those standards, or nothing in terms of the relief we're seeking, I believe, is egregious relative to those particular standards. So I would stand behind sort of both of those areas in terms to answer your question.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments from the board? Oh, if you want to be recognized.
You got to open it to the public.
Okay, we will open to the public. Is there anyone who'd like to ask a question or make a statement concerning the application?
I'm Vince Dominic. I'm here as the Economic Development Director for the township. A couple things. First of all, the applicant has already made, and another thing, over $100 million investment that he sold. He's now making a over $60 million, I believe, investment because he believes in the township, and he's going to he created hundreds of jobs at the other site. He's going to create hundreds of jobs at this site. So that's important to note. It's also very important to note that he's having the faith in the community and this board and the staff and the township governing body and the planning board to make sure that we do what is right. In regard to, and I'm not going to repeat everything that Mr. Phillips just went through, but I think you'd see that most of the variances are either de minimis, could be de minimis if, and Mark pointed out correctly, we have not adopted that, but I think we're fairly confident that the majority, if not all of it, will be adopted. And even if it's not, Mr. Phillips pointed out very eloquently at the end that most of the variances, if this building was located in the M2, would be mostly de minimis. And I think it's really important when we go to the FAR variance, which we've always had somewhat of an issue with. I think the explanation for that was very well done, where most buildings in this township, unless they're this type, and we have some, their equipment's on the outside. They don't need to have the clean air. As he pointed out, over 40% of it, and it's also, when we talk about the massing and everything else, the original application that was put forward to us, the initial draft, which was, 4, 5, 6 months ago, there were significant changes made to that in response to some of the issues. The most important one, I believe, is originally this part of the addition was 2 stories instead of the 1 stories, and we had a very big concern about that because of the massing, and they agreed to to make it to 1 story. In addition, a majority of the trees originally on this site plan were going to be removed. They went back to the drawing board and they made significant changes to the grading with the retaining walls and how they were going to do it to save the trees so that we would have the screening. With that all said, I really do thank the applicant for making almost $200 million investment in the township and the creation of hundreds of jobs, and I would urge the board to approve this matter this evening.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Close to the public. Anything you'd like to add?
Very, very briefly, Mr. Chairman. As Mr. Dominic pointed out, we've worked with the township to develop a plan to try to minimize the impact of the variances that we are in fact seeking. When this building was vacant, first of all, if you drive by the building now, it is probably one of the best maintained buildings, maybe other than the Palace and SHI on Davidson Avenue. It's always well landscaped, the lawn is always taken care of. And before my client purchased the property, if you drove past that building, the grass was about this high. It was not attended to, and it was an eyesore in that area. I think the one thing, if you harken back to 2 hours ago when my client testified, he intends to keep this a first-class building with a first-class operation. To some degree, because the building looks very good and the landscaping looks very good, we were challenged to try to preserve everything. Some of the other buildings on that street that have less landscaping along the frontage, have less improvements along the frontage. If we came in and said, we're going to do all of this, you guys would all be excited because we're improving it. Here, our challenge was to try to maintain what we had and also enhance it, which I think we have done. And I think once we do all of that, I think the building will still be one of the premier buildings along Davidson Avenue. I think the other thing that I think you need to recognize, and I think Mr. Hilly pointed out, yes, the ordinance has not been adopted, but this is not the first application that this board has heard where some buildings that were once used for permitted uses within the Davidson Avenue corridor are changing back to warehousing or manufacturing. So I think if you look at the trend of what's happening in this area and the need for office space versus the need for warehouse space, it's pretty well evident that there is going to be a change in what may be happening in Davidson going down the road. And I think once this building is built, it will be consistent both with what was the original intent of Davidson Avenue as far as appearance, and also with what may be the future development of Davidson Avenue based on the zoning. Having said all of that in general terms, I think what we have done is worked hard to come to a design to make the property work. I think Mr. Phillips has clearly pointed out the variances that we are seeking and their basis. And I do think that once this building is built, it can operate and function well on that site without any detriment to
the view sheds of the traveling motorist on Davidson Avenue, and it also will function as is needed to both by the applicant and will not have any impact on any of the adjoining properties, and I would respectfully request that the board grant the site plan approval along with the D and C variances. Thank you.
Okay, any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just real quick, I don't think it was noted, but there are light manufacturing and light industrial uses along Davidson Avenue. Right across the street, there's actually 2 sites. I'm not sure if that was testified to. And 2 lots up on the same side of Davidson is also a warehouse. So it's already, it's predominantly office buildings, hotels, but it does have a mixture already of some light industrial uses. I think this area back in the day had been zoned light industrial. I think at some point in the 80s was rezoned to corporate business, and then office buildings and hotels propped up, but there's still, again, some remnants of the old industrial zone along that stretch. And if the board is inclined to make a motion, I can provide the list of the conditions if you're.
Any comments? Any motion?
The only comment I have is that I'm troubled by the idea that if we grant a use variance that allows someone to move from a manufacturing district to a light warehousing district, that somehow later, if they come along and want to make changes to the building, we're sort of like dragged along by our past decisions, because I thought that the first decision was a good one. I'm troubled by the intensity of the use in this case, and it just seems unfair that we're sort of like shackled by something that we did previously, which we thought was a good idea when we did it, but it seems like we have to be careful about doing that in the future.
Yeah, I don't think you're shackled. I think this is an entirely different. The reason they're back before you for a new use variance and for the FAR is that you approved the use variance for the intensity and what you were presented 2 years ago, and now they're proposing something different, and it, again, not only triggered the FAR, but just by the fact that they're expanding that use, they need a new use variance.
Yeah, but
so I wouldn't consider the prior one necessarily.
No, but that's
Consider
not,
this.
that's not what Mr. Phillips said. He said essentially that having previously approved this use, that the proofs essentially apply now. That was kind of the way I understood I'm convinced by Mr. Phillips' testimony. I mean, clearly, Mr. Lanford read your report and decided that he would get somebody of Mr. Phillips' quality, but I think that's essentially what you said.
Yeah. In my opinion, they have a use variance. Again, I'll repeat myself, but they have a use variance for the intensity that they proposed before. Now they're proposing that same use, but more intense, and they need to. So I don't think you're shackled by your previous approval. They need to prove to you that they should be able to continue this light manufacturing use, and they should be allowed to do it at the intensity that they're now proposing. So I would just consider what you've heard tonight and consider this on its own.
Oh, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I just was listening to his arguments.
I think you can, in a way, you can assume that prior use variance wasn't granted, and here you have a light manufacturing use at this intensity.
Thanks, Mark.
Any other comments?
I just wanted to say that merging the uses, that's where the future's going. And it's no question that when you're talking about the new master plan, that's headed there. And I think this is a really great example of what we can do in the future, too.
Any other comments? I would only say I think I understand the caution expressed by some of the board members. I think we have to be careful with these uses, or listen to them and deliberate them carefully. I think this can work because it is, according to testimony, a really very clean operation because of the type of use it is. We're not debating a trucking company or disparage anything, but it seems like it's a clean, efficient.
It's not a
use that
tallow
we can-
factory, right?
That we can put into this area. That's just my opinion. If you have a motion, we'll be glad to entertain it.
I would move to approve this application. I'll let Mark lay out the conditions. It's not clear to me whether or not a waiver was or was not requested.
Yeah, so I'll go through them. So yes, there was a waiver requested for the amount of trees, but they're going to work with staff to add as many as possible to make the site as compliant as they can make it. They're going to comply with all staff reports. They're going to paint the existing building to match the color of the proposed addition. They are going to investigate moving the retaining wall along the side property line and add landscaping where possible. Similarly, they're going to add landscaping along the front property line and hire a landscape architect to mitigate the impact of the front yard variance of the addition. There's no parking variance involved for the reasons that we discussed. And the land bank parking screening, they're going to add street trees and a low hedge in case the land bank parking area is going to be improved.
Okay, any additions? Second?
Second.
Okay.
Anthony Caldwell,
Yes.
Laura Grauman,
Yes?
Bruce McCracken,
Yes.
Alan Rich,
Yes.
Robert Shepherd,
No.
Gary Rosenthal,
Yes.
and Chairman Thomas.
Thank you very much.
Are you intending to do the last one? I'll defer to input from the board. I prefer to wait, but I think it's a little late to start.
We thank you for your confidence in us, Mr. Chairman and the board. We will make you proud of our building. We'll ensure everything is going to look as nice or even better.
Okay, thank you. Good luck with it. The last application.
Mr. Chairman, if you want, I'm here in 2 weeks. If you want to carry it for 2 weeks, I'll be back on the 17th.
Okay, Nestor and Victor Marin, ZBA 190027, C variances in association with a two-family home with one 5-bedroom unit and second floor, on the first and second floor, and a 2-bedroom unit in the basement at 204 Franklin Boulevard, Block 275, Lot 1.01 in the R7 zone, be continued until October 17th without further notification. And is there a motion?
So
Moved.
Meeting adjourned.